Well, hello there, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the music as much as Sharon and I both enjoyed it. We were dancing away here, living it up, just waiting to start this fantastic new Firebase Live extended stream, all for you. Hey, Sharon. Can we hear you? Can we get a mic check?
Sorry. Hey, guys.
Great to see you again. So we have an exciting lineup for you all tonight. We have 2 talks on this stream and 2 talks on stream 1. You can find out how to switch streams by the link that should be below where you're watching us right now. So we have 15 minutes before our first speaker starts his talk. It's PJ Welcome is going to be our first speaker. PJ is a very interesting guy. We were having a quick chat before we went live tonight, and we discovered that PJ is a bit of an animal when it comes to Dota, would you believe? The guy is an absolute beast. He's got over 4,000 hours clocked up in that game. Man, I don't know how he gets time for the photography. He's an excellent photographer as well, by the way. If any of you guys are photography buffs, nature especially, hit PJ up afterwards. I'm sure he'll share his Twitter handle afterwards. During the discussion, I'll add PJ in here. We might have a quick chat just while we're winding up. Hey, PJ.
Hey, PJ.
Hey, how's it going?
You're welcome.
Thanks.
You get that joke all the time, don't you? I'm sorry. I'll show myself out. For everybody else, PJ's surname is PJ Welcome. I'm sorry, that was a terrible joke. I'm a dad. I'm supposed to make dad jokes. That's just me setting the tone for the rest of this stream, and I don't apologize. So, PJ, you were telling me before the stream that one of the furthest places you've gone to do a talk was in a place called Lodz in Poland, and we were all like, yeah, that's kind of no big deal. Poland for us is quite close. We play them in soccer quite a lot. You probably know that. You're a big soccer fan. We won't mention the German teams in this stream.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about your trip to Lodz?
Oh, yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was, for me, I think it was 16-hour flight. So I had to fly to Paris for 12 hours or 11 hours. And then I had some layover and another like 3 hours from there. So it was a very long time. Great trip. Really cool conference. And I had to take another 2-hour drive to Lodz from Warsaw. And then, yeah, it was a pretty cool conference, a really, really small town. Great people, great food, amazing food. Yeah, it was pretty great. I really enjoyed it. It was super cold. I'm not really used to European cold. So it was like, I don't know, 3 degrees or something like that. And I'm used to like winter. I'm in winter at the moment, and it's like, I don't know, I think it's like 10 degrees or something like that. And like that's for me is like normal winter. Yeah, so it's pretty cold.
Because you're South African massive, isn't that right? You World Cup champions in rugby. We won't. We'll avoid that subject, I think. You guys have some fantastic rugby team. Congratulations. That's begrudgingly, by the way.
Yeah, but we don't have the good football that you guys have.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
So whereabouts in South Africa are you living right now?
So yeah, I'm in Johannesburg. It's like I don't know if it's the capital. I think it might not be. I think Pretoria is, but the province is kind of like the bigger kind of like industrial, I don't know, area in South Africa where people kind of go to work, and then yeah, that's pretty much where I am.
Is there a big tech scene down there? Have you got lots of meetups going on?
Yeah, so there's quite a few tech peeps out here. There's a few meetups, quite a lot of them, and then there's also a lot of meetups down in Cape Town. So Cape Town is by the beach. Yeah, lovely. That's the more relaxing side of South Africa. But people are still doing really very good startup scene out there. So whereas in Johannesburg, it's more like corporate, more bigger companies and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's right off. That's fantastic. Still, I'm delighted. I love hearing stories about different people just meeting up randomly in different areas of the world and go, "Oh, I'm working with Firebase. I was at a GDG meetup and we did this thing." And it's fantastic. You hear some brilliant stories, even like yourself, PJ, going to deliver a talk in Poland, which is so far away and so far removed from what you're used to. I mean, for us to go to South Africa to do a talk would be the equivalent, and that just seems like so far away. I know in time there's only like an hour's difference. Is that right? Sometimes 2 hours with daylight savings.
Yeah, I think it's 1 hour right now, and then probably 2 hours with daylight savings when it comes back.
Yeah, but for such a massive distance in like air miles, and then you're only just 1 hour behind. It's one of the amazing things about our lovely planet here, which
Yeah,
you've taken many photographs of. See that? Did you see
yeah.
that segue right in there to your
I
photography?
saw
That,
that.
that was
Yeah,
that was smooth, right? Yeah.
yeah.
So
Very smooth.
your photography, PJ. How long have you been taking nature photographs?
So it's been about I think about like 5 or 6 years. I'm not any kind of pro or anything. Like I just kind of like enjoy it. It's kind of like one of my hobbies that I do. So I just kind of just end up taking photos wherever I go. But I enjoy landscapes, and I really enjoy going out into the bush. So obviously in South Africa, we have lots of wild animals in the bush, which is amazing. So like leopards and lions, elephants and giraffes. So it's like an hour's drive away from my house for me to just go and see wild animals, which is amazing. Like in the wild, not in captivity or anything. So it's
That's
really really
amazing.
amazing. Yeah. So we just go on like safari and go take photos of awesome animals.
We don't have anything like that here in Ireland right now. We've no snakes, no spiders, no big cats. We've the most exotic thing I think we have is like the grey squirrel.
Thank God.
Thank God. That's right, Sharon. Thank God.
Yeah,
We don't have so many worries when it comes to animals over here. You know, it's more the rain that'll get you here in
yeah.
Ireland.
Okay, yeah. I actually haven't been to Ireland. I would love to come at some point. I heard that you guys have quite a large amount of pubs.
We we do, but in this climate now you have to go wearing a mask and it's hard to drink pints with a mask.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true, but we do have a lot of old history. I think you'd really enjoy some of the photography over here. There's a lot of opportunity for the green fields, the really ancient tombs. Some of the old burial monuments here in Ireland are older than the pyramids. Would you believe?
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it's really old. I think they should probably
Wow.
market that a bit more. But hey, that's not my area. That's Sharon. That could be your job.
Deal.
Deal.
Okay.
Nice.
Now, I think we have to do some housekeeping next before we move towards your talk. We want to give some people a chance to join. We have another 6 minutes
Awesome.
before you start giving us your talk. PJ, I'm just going to remove you for 2 minutes, and we'll have you back in 6 minutes. You can get yourself
Awesome.
sorted, get a cup of tea. See you in a minute. Sharon, what an amazing guy, huh?
Yes, definitely.
I suppose we
Very
better
interesting.
introduce ourselves, even though we've been talking for a while. I am David Renton, GDG Galway. I work here in Genesis, as you can see from behind me. I'm a DevOps engineer, and I love all things Google.
Yeah, like that. I'm Sharon Keane. I am a lead in GDG Athlone. David actually is a former GDG lead in Athlone. And yeah, I work for a company called Nueda, and we're contracted into many different industries across the tech. So, but I'm also a DevOps engineer working in the telecoms communication at the moment.
And all around awesome person. Isn't that right,
All
Sharon?
around rock star.
All around rock star. Do you know when you see on those job adverts where they're looking for a rock star? That's Sharon. So we have 2 sessions tonight, each are 30 minutes, and then we'll have a fireside chat at the end, which will be your opportunity to ask questions. There is a code of conduct. It can be seen at devparty.io, code of conduct. It just means be awesome to one another. That's the basics of it here. Social media, please use the hashtag GDGDevParty and hashtag Firebase Live Extended. And there will be a small prize for the best question asked in the fireside chat. Did I get that right, Sharon?
You got that spot on, Davey.
Okay, I just had to check sometimes. Normally, my wife tells me if I'm right or not.
The work wife here.
So, our schedule today is on track 1, starting in 5 minutes. Is data modeling with Cloud Firestore with Jason, our very own Jason Berryman. On track 2, which is the best track, by the way, right here. Stay right here with us. We've got PJ, who you met a little bit earlier. PJ Welcome was going to be talking about developing locally with Firebase Emulator UI. I've kind of run out of things to talk about now. We had a chat to PJ. We kind of know a little bit about him. We got to know him as a person. Was there any other questions you wanted to ask, Sharon, before we started off?
No, all good.
Well, I wish I had got a hold of him earlier. I could have said, hey, can you put some of your photos of those wild animals into your presentation? Like as those memory blocks. You remember we used to do? Just, hey, remember this? Yeah, we could have had some great fun with that. I would really like to see that. Maybe we can connect afterwards, or maybe on his Twitter. He probably has a lot of them up there, or on his Instagram. You're an Instagram person as well. Is that your link for your Insta or your Twitter there, Sharon?
Twitter there, but it's probably for both.
I do not tweet, so I'm just David. You can find me on the internet anywhere. Actually, don't go Google searching me. That's a bad idea. So we're going to start in 4 minutes with PJ Welcome, Google Developer Expert for Firebase. Probably has many, many other skills, but for tonight, he's going to be our Firebase expert. If you want to check out our code of conduct, you can do so on devparty.io. Please tweet about us, share the stream. If you know anybody that should be watching and isn't here already, please send them a message, let them know what's up. If you're part of a group, you might send it into the group as well. You never know what you're going to learn in these things, or who you're going to meet, or see. Maybe if we're lucky, we might see pictures of wild African animals, which would be awesome.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, pop them into the chat, and we can see them here as well.
That's right. We are going to save the technical questions for the end at the Fireside chat, where all of the presenters from both Stream 1 and Stream 2 will be answering questions after the second talk on Stream 2 here tonight. The Fireside chat will be on Stream 1, but don't go anywhere until after the second talk on Stream 2. That link for Stream 1 is going to be just below where you're looking at us right now. There should be a link to the Stream 1 down there. And we will be all switching across there at, what time did I say we should switch across there? Sharon, what time is the second talk over?
9:45.
Couldn't be quarter to 9. 7:45.
7:45.
Okay. 7:45. That's right. And we have to sync up here with Stream 1, so we can't start any earlier. So you're stuck with both Sharon and I for another 3 minutes. 2 minutes. Hey, 2 minutes counting down. If anybody's ever done this before, it's awful hard to fill 2 minutes when you have no idea what to talk about.
Dave, you've done a lot longer than 2 minutes in the past.
I know, but it's when you're in front of people and you have people to work with, and you can just go ask a question. You know, someone that's doing some interesting work, or they've got a sticker on the back of their laptop. You can go over and say, "Hey, you were at I/O 2015. Geez, I was at 2016. How did you get on? What was the swag like? You know, that's the important stuff when you go to these events. What was the swag? What did you get? What did you bring home?" Because probably the technology you got out of it was probably outdated by now. I mean, if you were at something in 2015 or 2016, coming to 2020, that's 4 years old. I mean, we don't even see that anymore. Technology is just moving so fast that it's so hard to keep up. Like Firebase, I remember when that was just launched. What was that, in 2016? And then there was the Firebase hosting as well, what came after that. Then we had Firebase functions when we were moving into serverless kind of area. I mean, there's been such progress made over the last few years. I think we're moving faster now than we ever had in all of human history.
Definitely. And we've had plenty of Firebase talks in Athlone.
That's right. Yeah, if anybody's around the Midlands area, you should hit up GDG Athlone for some interesting tech talks. Still first Tuesday of every month, Sharon?
Will be, yeah.
When we're out of the lockdown.
When we're out of the lockdown.
In Galway, we haven't set a schedule just yet, but you should, if you're in the west of Ireland, check out GDG Galway on Meetup. We'll have some interesting talks come on. We'd love you to come down and meet up, hang out with us. We'll do some interesting stuff, do some code labs, try and get people qualified. Have you guys been doing any of the code labs to get qualified yet, Sharon?
Yeah.
What qualifications are you guys looking at? The ACE, is it?
Yeah, definitely the ACE. There's a couple of others. We're just still trying to decide what are the best ones to put on now coming up.
Okay. Look, I think we have done our due diligence. We have met it all the way to 15:15. PJ, come in here and save us. Thank you very much, PJ. I should have written more material and some jokes or something. Hey. Okay, PJ, I think you are up next. And you can take over and rescue. Here we go. Introducing PJ, welcome. Google Developer Expert. PJ, I shall let you take it over from here, and both Sharon and I shall remove ourselves.
Okay, awesome. Can you share my screen?
Yeah, if you just share from what you have there, you should have a little share screen down the bottom.
Yeah, I've shared it. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. You should get a little pop-up and it'll ask you what you want to share. If you share just your tab, and make sure if you have audio that you select audio.
Yeah, I'm sharing the screen at the moment. It's not showing up for you guys.
No, we're not seeing anything. Oh, there we go.
There you go. Awesome. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's really, really great to be speaking to people out in Ireland and in the UK. I'm Peter John Welcome, or PJ, as you guys know. I'm a GDE for Firebase. I'm out based in South Africa. And my Twitter handle at the bottom is PJ Apples. Don't ask me about the handle. It's just kind of my universal handle at the moment, but it has a long story around it. And today I'll be talking about developing locally with the Firebase emulator. So a little bit about me. So we're speaking about wild animals. So this is actually a photo that I took some time ago. It's a leopard and it's cub. But who I am, I'm a freelance mobile engineer. I'm also, like I said, a Google Developer Expert. I mostly do stuff in the mobile space, so Android and iOS development, a little bit of Firebase. My cloud of choice when I do have to do anything on the cloud is Google Cloud. And every now and then I do dabble a little bit in machine learning. So I do quite a few talks on machine learning. So if you guys do want to check those out, that's really cool. But yeah, you guys are not here to listen to me talk about myself. You're here to hear about Firebase and the emulator suite. So a quick little history about Firebase. So Firebase was this great product where you could have multiple devices syncing up data very seamlessly in real time. At some point, they also brought out Cloud Functions, and Cloud Functions was supposed to help with that situation where you wanted some kind of backend and you wanted to do have that extra functionality on top of your actual database. But one of the things with Firebase was that it was always online, right? So you kind of had to have this database in the cloud when it was the real-time database, and then Firestore came out. There was just this everything was pretty much online. It was really hard for you to do development without actually being online. So in terms of like a really good dev environment, you kind of want to be able to do a lot of the things offline, right? So there was this whole thing where you always had to be online. It felt like sometimes you were even working in production. So we were developing and you had to like actually link to this database, which was like really, really weird. And that's not really the greatest feeling all the time. Then you had to kind of create different databases, or you needed to create different projects and stuff, which we'll go over. You'd have teammates sometimes that would maybe be sad because you broke the database while they were working, and then stuff wasn't syncing correctly, and you wouldn't know if it was your issue or not. And from a point of view, if you had if you were on the free plan for a specific project or something like that, you would use your free quota up really, really quickly, just trying to develop your product instead of actually using that only when you needed to go to production. And there's a few other development environment cons from Firebase, where it was just really, really hard to develop offline. And so from a mobile point of view, there were a few hacky solutions that you could do. You couldn't get away from not being online, but you could try and at least cache your data. So Firebase had a cool thing in the SDK where you could actually cache your data. So that was really, really cool. And then there was what you could do is that you could create different projects. So you could have a development project for Firebase, and you could have a production project. And you kind of switch between the JSON data or the plist file, which kind of worked, but it wasn't really, really great. You could actually create separate real-time databases. So you could actually have a production one, and then you could create another one. You had to be on the Blaze plan though to create two databases, but you could do that. And that could also work really, really well because you kind of have databases that were only for development purposes. You could break the database whenever you want to, versus when in production, you kind of don't really want to be messing with any of the data there because it's mostly user data. You could also create different projects inside of your actual project. So you could create different apps so you could have 2 or 3 iOS apps in the specific project with different bundle IDs. And for Android, you could have different package names. So this was solutions that you could kind of do, but it was really, really hacky. It wasn't really great at all. So then in around 2017, I was sitting watching the Firebase Summit, right? And I was watching this talk on Cloud Functions, the one that I'm not going to play the video's here, but you can see the link down below. I was watching this video, and they were talking about how to write different Cloud Functions and all the things you could do with it. And then at some point, they kind of spoke about this emulator, and I was like, okay, well, that's really, really cool. How do you use it? And they actually explained towards the end of the video how you actually spawn it up, and it was very experimental at that point. And the emulator's kind of been there all the time, where you could be developing offline. The only problem was with the emulator is that it was very command line based. It wasn't very visual. It wasn't very intuitive at the time. So it was really, really hard to use. And also just trying to figure out what was even happening in the emulator with all this just stuff happening, logs going in your command line while you're using it and stuff was just kind of crazy. So I think it was there for people to use, but it wasn't very appealing, and it wasn't really, really easy at the time. So then recently, the Firebase team released this product, which was already there, the emulator, the Firebase emulator. But what they did is that they actually released a UI for it, and this was really, really great. So the Firebase emulator suite, or the Firebase UI emulator, allows us from our Android emulators, from our iOS emulators, or from our web apps to actually connect to a local instance of Firebase that have these products, so the Firestore, real-time database, Cloud Functions, hosting, and PubSub locally on our machines. This is really, really cool because now we don't have to really be online anymore, and we can pretty much do local development within Firebase. So there's only, at the moment, there are only 5 products that are supported. And once you actually once you have the emulator suite spawned up, you'll see on the right-hand side over here, you'll see that that's kind of what it looks like. So you have an emulator overview, and it tells you about all the emulators that are actually running here. And you can see also the color scheme is different. So The color scheme is intentional because this is kind of a local environment, and it's not supposed to be used in terms of production. So they changed the color scheme for that. So what are the benefits for us using this UI emulator? So again, like I mentioned, you're going to have access to your databases offline now, which is really, really cool. One of the biggest things, especially if you're a DevOps person, is that now you can actually create some kind of Docker images or something like that around Firebase, and you can spawn them up in Docker images, and you can actually do end-to-end testing with your Firebase code that you're writing, either in your website or in your apps itself, if you have some kind of instrumentation test or something like that running, which is really, really great. So you don't have to actually hit it against the real database that's in the cloud. There's easy ways to import and export data through the command line. It definitely increases development productivity. You can also now write unit tests against your security rules, which is really, really great, because this is something that you would kind of need to like figure out within the rules tab in your database. There is a simulator online that you could use, but to kind of test, but now you can actually write your own test around it. And there was actually a great talk by Todd, who is one of the Firebase developers on the Firebase team, who gave a great talk on actually unit testing your security rules with the UI emulator. So I definitely think to definitely check it out. I think I have it at the end of my talk, a link to that. And then obviously one of the biggest benefits of all to probably people at least starting out with Firebase is that it doesn't actually contribute to your quota in terms of how many requests you are making. So if you're on the free tier, you're pretty much not using any of your free tier quota while you're actually developing, which was kind of something that happened in the past. So some of the limitations of the Firebase UI emulator is that it doesn't support all of the products. So the two big ones that a lot of people have asked about is authentication and storage. So these are the two big ones. I think I did hear on one of the talk that the Firebase team gave, I said, I think that they are looking at these products, but I think they're a little bit harder to emulate in terms of having a development environment for that. But so this is kind of a situation where if you have any of these products linked to your database where you're uploading images or you have authentication, you might have to actually still use the online product and then kind of mix and match with offline and online for these products. Also, it does support, the UI emulator does support Cloud Function triggers, but doesn't support all of them. Again, if you have any Cloud Function triggers for auth storage, for test lab, for any of those, none of those work. It's pretty much only the database, the databases, and stuff like HTTP Cloud Functions, which we'll get to a little bit later. So one of the things that a lot of people think about when they see this, they're like, okay, cool. Like this is really great that they made this emulator, right? Maybe I should try and host it myself. Maybe put it in my own Docker container and maybe try to scale it myself. This is really not recommended. It is a local environment. I think the way Firebase works and the scaling properties that Google has around it is kind of like perfect for this environment. So this is pretty much only supposed to be used for local development, and you shouldn't actually try and actually spawn this thing up yourself and like put it in your own like cloud or something like that. So I just thought I'd put it there, put it out there because it might be on the tip of your mind, but try not to do that. So cool, let's get started with the emulator. So we've gone through a bunch of stuff and we've spoken about the emulator, but let's see how this whole thing actually works. So in order for us to start, we need to install Node. So you need to have npm installed, version 8 or greater. You also need to have the Java JDK installed. I'm guessing that somewhere it actually uses the Java JDK for there's some jar files that need to be opened and stuff. So you need a JDK, and then you need to install the Firebase CLI. So we can go through that. So once you have Node installed and the JDK, you're all good to go, and then you can install the Firebase CLI through npm. So our next slide over here, what we have is npm. So to install Firebase CLI, we just go npm install Firebase tools. Once we do that, we'll have the CLI installed. We then need to log in. So you need to log into your Firebase account that you've registered with Google. So you log into that. It will open some web page. You'll authorize the page, and then your CLI will be all good, and then you'll be logged in. Then from there, what we need to do is we need to do Firebase init. So if you already have an existing project, you probably don't need to do this. But if you have a new project, you can do Firebase init, and you can actually pick the products that you actually want to be developing for. So if you want to do cloud functions and you want a database, you pretty much pick those products, and it will create all the necessary files for you to actually start that. And it will create this firebase.json file that kind of has all of your important information for your project. Then we have, so then for us to now get started with the actual emulator itself, we're going to do Firebase init emulators. And what it will do is it will look through all the products that you've selected in the previous step, and it will spawn up the emulators for those specific products, right? So it will then download all the emulators for them, the latest versions of the emulators for that specific project, and store it in your project. And then for us, once we have that all good, then we can say Firebase emulator start. And what this will do is it'll actually spawn up a Node.js instance of the Firebase emulator. And so just something quick, if you kind of have ports, let's say that you already using port 4000 or 8000 or whatever, or 8080 for something else, because Firebase has a whole bunch of default ports. But if you want to change those ports to make it something else because they're all already being used, inside of your firebase.json file, you can actually specify which port you actually want to have for each product. So you can say, I want functions to run on different port, and then the Firebase UI to run on a different port, Firestore, and all of that. So if you're ever looking for that, or if you have stuff that's already running and you don't want to really stop that, you can actually just choose a different port to actually host your emulators on there. And once we do all of that, so you can see in my first line, I said Firebase emulator start. Sorry, it's a little bit small. It will actually then go through all of your products. One of the things that I've noticed is that I have Node version 14 installed, but my project has Node version 10 on it. I've specifically specified that because previous versions of Cloud Functions, it just wouldn't work if you had the latest version, which is 14. So I've put it down to 10, but I think now the Firebase team has upgraded the ability to support, I think, version 12 of Node at least. I think that might be in beta, but yeah, I think just be sure that your Node version does matter. So you will check that. You will see maybe some errors from that, but just make sure that maybe you change it to 10 or 12. Cool. And then from there, once you've started it up, you'll see it says all emulators are ready, and it gives you where they're hosted, so the ports that they hosted, and the actual where you can view it specifically in your browser. So we'll get to that now. What you can also see there, I've highlighted port 4001 because I specifically made it on 4001 because I have other stuff running on 4000. So I just wanted to show that that you can run them on different ports. So you'll see the defaults on 4000 for the Firebase UI. And once we have it up and running, we'll kind of see something like this if we go to localhost 4000, as you can see in the bottom right corner. So how do we interact with it? So we have this thing running. It's running on our machines now. We have a local environment of Firebase. That's amazing. How do we actually interact with the emulator itself? So like I mentioned previously, just bringing it back, that the way we interact with our emulator is going to be through our Android, iOS, or web app, and we can pretty much connect directly to the emulators through the Firebase SDKs that are provided to us already. So the examples that I'm going to be giving in this talk is going to be iOS samples, so it's going to be Swift code. But all of this works within Android and in web, and Firebase has great documentation, which I will link at the end of the slides, to how to do it on these other platforms. So to link our Firestore, to our Firestore database, all we need to do is we need to create some kind of function. So this is just me trying to put it in a small function. And then what we need to do is we need to access the Firebase Firestore settings, right? And then, so we're creating an object there of that. Once we do, we want to change the property of our host. So our host is now going to be at localhost, but also the port that we specified for it. So we need to add that. What we need to do is we also want to turn off persistence, because persistence will have our app cache the Firebase data from the last run that we had. And the thing is, we don't really want that because it can provide inconsistent data at the end of the day. We also want to turn off SSL because we're not actually running on SSL, so it's going to be a local non-SSL version. I mean, if you do host it somewhere, maybe if you guys have like a team environment and it is secure with SSL, then you can obviously turn this back on. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take those settings that we just created and we're going to set it back to our Firestore settings. From there, after we call Firebase app config, we then call the emulator settings straight after that, so that as soon as our Firebase database and everything has been initialized, our emulators get initialized straight after that, so that we have everything running and it knows where to point everything to. So I have a small little video quickly just demonstrating this. I will play it and hopefully there's no sound or anything, but I'm going to just, so what's happening here is that I have the emulator over here. This is my Firebase Firestore instance. And this is a small app that I created with some buttons and some labels. And I'm just changing the data in the database. And you can see on the right-hand side that it's changing in my application. So that's just a simple example of me using this now locally, which is great. So yeah. So moving on to maybe doing something a little bit more complicated with Cloud Functions. So I also have the Cloud Functions emulator running on my machine. And now I would like to actually trigger a Cloud Function. So Cloud Functions with the Firebase SDK at the moment, you can trigger these Cloud Functions through the HTTP calls, HTTP functions. So what I'm doing over here is I just created a quick Node.js function. The Firebase imports at the top, and I called it say hello. The data that I'm outputting probably is not really relevant to say hello, but it's okay. So what I'm doing over here is I'm just creating the Firestore database. I created a JSON object with some random data in there. And then what I'm doing is I'm just going to take that data and then set it inside of my database once this function is called. So I'm going to call the function, and this function is going to set the data in my database. Then in iOS, there's actually a library, a Firebase Functions library, where you can actually access Firebase Functions directly instead of actually writing your own HTTP call to the Firebase function. You can actually use this library to actually access your Firebase functions, which is really, really great. So it's just a pod that you install. And then what you do after that is you create this Firebase function instance, this object. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to set that function to actually use the emulator, right? And then you can tell it where you're hosting it and give it the port that you're hosting on. And then what I've done is I've just created a small function over here saying call cloud function. It takes in some data, some text. That text is the text that I'm actually going to push to the cloud function, and that's going to be our parameters that we take in. From there, there's a callback with a trading closure here. And this is pretty much once it hits the cloud functions and posts the data back to us, we're going to get that data back. We're going to deserialize this very simple code, and we're going to then put it into a text field. So then what I did over here is that I'm just calling the cloud function, and I'm saying please put it in this image text document. So just a small video to kind of show this in action quickly. So I click the upload button, and what it's doing is it then kicks off the cloud function. As you can see, there's some of the logs over there, and you can see the entity name has now changed. And if I refresh, for some reason, it doesn't refresh. So automatically, but then as soon as I refresh the page, you'll see that all the data is inside of there. And it's also showing in the application which had just a small listener on a specific document. Awesome. So the UI emulator can do a lot more. So you can obviously do. I'm not a web developer, so I don't really do a lot of hosting of websites and all of that. But you can actually run the Firebase web hosting locally too, so you can actually host your website, see that everything's working all good before you actually push it to Firebase hosting or for the rest of the world to actually see your website. Like I mentioned previously, you can run these emulators from the CLI, like in a containerized way on your CI, which is really, really great. So they have container emulated images that you can actually just execute straight from the CLI, which is really cool. You can emulate pub sub interactions, so like almost like it's actually that's hitting your Google Cloud instance of pub sub. You can emulate those through cloud functions, which is really, really great. The real-time database interaction, and then what's cool is that you can also still interact with external servers through the emulator. So if your cloud functions have some kind of external sources that it needs to fetch data from or it needs to retrieve data from, you can still do that even though it's running locally. It's just that you don't have Firebase running. You don't have Firebase running in the cloud where it then hits some external server and all of those type of things. At this point, I haven't tested it, but I don't think that you can access then your Google Cloud APIs and stuff like that because you're running it locally. You might need some kind of token or some service account JSON as part of your project. But I think if you are trying to do that, I think you might be able to still do it through the emulator too. And then there's just some references. So all the code that I showed this evening is going to be at PJ at GDG Cloud Vision. It's a project that I've kind of just been working on randomly and I just kind of like update some stuff there. So yeah, all the code is there. There's some really great documentation and some really good talks at the bottom here. I've just linked them all here so that if you do want to check them out at some point, then great. And then from my side, thank you for having me. This was great chatting to you guys. Again, if you guys want to tweet at me, tell me how great or if the talk wasn't good, if you have any questions, definitely hit me up on Twitter. I'm always there to answer questions. Thanks again.
Thanks very much, PJ. That was a wonderful talk. We have a lot of questions coming in here in the chat, but as our next speaker, I'll just share a screen real quick here.
Hey, Chris.
Hello.
We have Chris coming up next. We have our next talks. PJ, thank you so much, sir. We have a lot of questions. I'm hoping some of the guys will hang on to ask questions in the Fireside chat. You're able to hang on for a half hour, are you, PJ? Yeah, fantastic. So we have over on track 1, building Swift UI apps with Firebase, and right here we have Chris Esplin with Firebase CI/CD with Cloud Build. Sharon, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, perfect. So I was quickly chatting to Chris earlier on, and in the Dave and Sharon style, we tried to get a little bit of dirt on our speakers before we can introduce them. So Chris did tell me, and got picture evidence as well to go with it, that in his own words, he was tired of being a little bit stiff. So he spent 14 months at 20 minutes, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, learning to do the splits. So this is definitely one of the more cooler googly facts we've found out about somebody. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Chris, or how you?
Yeah. I'm getting old. Lots of back pain, but not anymore. Now I'm all flexible.
That's brilliant. I think that's definitely an achievement. Anyway.
Yeah, in my late 30s.
Hey, that's not that old.
Hey, that's not old. That's one way to get a reaction from everybody here. Call it 30-year-old old. My lord.
Hey, you understand the back pain, though. Well, maybe you don't, but
I do.
Okay, so it is definitely time to give you your slot so that we don't go out of sync with track 1. So we'll swiftly jump over to you, Chris.
All right. So this is my first Zoom presentation talk like this, and I've never done this sort of thing. So I typically do this, in front of people and have a lot of interaction. I really love interaction. So the more interaction we can get, the better. That'll make it a lot easier for me to gauge sort of where everybody is and how everyone's understanding what I'm trying to present. The stuff I'm going to go over is there's a lot. I'd like to make sure everybody comes along and that I slow down as needed. So just a quick introduction about myself. I've been doing mostly front-end web for about 10 years. I got in with Firebase back before they were acquired by Google, so about early 2013. I've built a bunch of projects on my own, built a business on my own using Firebase. So all the stuff here at chrisesplin.com, these projects are all Firebase projects. So you can see this one here, calligraphy.org, is a business I ran with my wife full time for 4 years. I've got fullstackfirebase.com, which is a sort of website you can go to see my Firebase notes. And I've got a YouTube channel and a howtofirebase.com, which is a bunch of old articles that I wrote. So haven't written those for a while. This I still use all the time. I've got a lot of notes. It's really useful to just go in and see, hey, this is how you do all the things in Firestore or authentication, whatever. But I use web and I use JavaScript. So hopefully this presentation won't be too challenging from sort of a stack perspective. I'd really like to talk about sort of how I've discovered CI/CD and how to use it with Firebase. So when you're in Firebase, you're kind of in the GCP environment. And yeah, there are lots and lots of CI/CD tools out there. The other one I've used is GitLab. But I decided to try to figure out how to do everything within GCP. How can I do my whole CI/CD pipeline within GCP? So I'm going to drop this in the chat. Possible. Oh, looks like I can't drop it in the chat. All right. Well, I'll have to give you guys this link later.
You can drop it into the internal chat there, Chris, and I'll put it across into the chat for you. No problem. If you'd feel more comfortable with me staying in the chat with you, we can do that and we can have a bit of crack. If that would work better for you.
That'll work, sure.
Awesome. I'll keep an eye on the chat here, and if anybody has any questions for Chris, you can shoot them across, and we'll keep this thing moving. Jeez, Chris, even for starting away, I was like, hey, show me the businesses you've made. So I'm really happy you put up that slide. I'm going to check out that calligraphy. Put that in there too, and we'll have a look at that.
All
give you some props as well, buddy.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So now you guys will have the link to this. You can follow along. I've tried to put everything in here because I can't teach you everything in just 30 minutes. So you can go back here and reference it and build up your system off of here. So we're going to work off of Fireline, which is a most recent open source project I've built. This is all built in my most sort of recent CI/CD methodology. It's all using Firebase, and it's all using Cloud Functions. So it's pretty comprehensive. And I'm going to go through here and reference this project as I go. Okay. So Fireline is built on top of Firebase, and it uses Firebase tools for its deployment. The first step to doing that is understanding how to set up these Firebase CLI calls. So the easiest way to think about it, I mean, you have to learn Firebase CLI, but the trick here is you want to always add the tokens and the projects as environment variables in all your calls. So see all these different calls that I've got saved here in this file. They all run with the token and the project in the environment variables. That way you can have different environment variables for your local dev, or for your staging, or for your prod. That's the first step.
So it's every call, Chris, right? Every call you're making on the CLI, you're putting the token and the project.
Yeah, all the time. And that's why you don't want to be typing this up by hand. It's just not a good idea. And you'll notice throughout this project, I try to use environment variables as much as possible. Really hate hard coding stuff because then you can't change it in between environments. Okay.
Clever idea.
Yeah.
Go DevOps.
DevOps, man. You got to get your DevOps on. It's not that hard if you take a little bit of time to futz around with it. So the next thing, once you understand this idea about running all your Firebase CLI commands with the token of the project, next we have to set up our Firebase functions config. So the way to do that, the best way I found is I have a Firebase config.sh file, and that takes my environment variables and assigns them and sets them to the Firebase functions config. So from Firebase functions config, now stripe.sk will be my stripe.sk environment variable, and so on and so forth. This file can get really big because you just tend to accumulate environment variables over time. So you put it all in here, and then you can call to it from anywhere. I usually call to it from inside my it's somewhere down here, inside my package.json file. But you'll want to be able to call that inside your CI/CD, so you can set all of your Firebase functions out to the functions config. Okay.
So it keeps everything moving in the same environment. So you're not calling a function that was called to a dev environment when you're working on a prod environment, for example.
Exactly.
So everything's kept in sync. Everything's going the same place.
Right. Yeah. When you deploy to dev, it'll deploy with your dev environment and to prod with your prod environment, and you can always reference those within your functions. Okay. So this is the next step. Create multiple Firebase or GCP projects for serious projects. A dev project, small project, no big deal. So for Fireline, for instance, this little open source project I made, it's just one project. Everything goes straight to there. I don't have like a dev or / staging environment, but anything of any significance, you're going to want at least two. Because you want to be able to ship something to your client before you ship it to the customer. Your clients love that. It becomes a requirement. And things break. So you want to be able to see them break before they get to your clients. Yeah.
I think everybody's felt that pain, breaking something just before demo day, just about to show the project owner, hey, look at this great function I've built. Down it goes.
Every time. So yeah, you always need to have two. If you care about the project enough and it's not just a side little gig, you need two. Okay. So the next thing we need to understand. So we've got basic Firebase CLI in place. Now we've got to set up our Docker file. So the Docker file, and you can see how this in Fireline, how this is structured. The Docker file lives at your root of the project, so right here. And the trick with the Docker file is you want to keep it as thin as you can, and you want to build it up in thin slices because Docker is amazing and it caches each layer. So you can use prior builds of the image as a cache for your future builds. So let's say I'm not changing this package.json file, then I won't have to rerun this layer of the image or this layer, or so every layer that stays the same. Every layer that stays the same is going to aid in your caching. So one of the tricks here is to copy your install files first, do as much install as possible, then add your app folder and actually do your build. Those are just some clever tricks to improve your speed, because you'll find that these files can be a little slow sometimes. Okay. Start with the thin image, and then just bare minimum as you work your way through the installs. Okay.
Can we make the text a little larger on that? It's difficult to see, Chris.
Is that
better,
right?
Chaba? Is that okay, Chaba? Yeah. Looks to be. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, sorry. I'll try to remember to do it as I switch between tabs. Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
So once you get your Docker file, you could run that locally, make sure the build works, and it pulls all your coding correctly and runs the build. And once you've got the build working, we can go to the next step. The next step is your cloudbuild.yaml. Again, that is at the root of the folder. So your cloudbuild.yaml. This looks like that, but we can look at it right here. So you have as many steps as you want, and it's just all Docker steps. So you'll want to start off with the name of your image. So in this case, it's gcr.io/cloudbuilder/docker. So that's GCP's Docker builder. And that lets me build my project. And so I'm going to build it, and I'm going to tag it to this registry name. And we're going to build in the dot means I'm building in the root folder. Okay, so once I've done the build, then I can reference that built tag. I can reference it as the starting point for the next step. So in that one, I'll start in the app directory and run yarn ci config. Then we'll start in the app directory, run yarn ci test, and then again with yarn ci deploy. Okay, so once that's done, that will push up our latest image. It'll push it out to GCP's Docker registry. So you can reference it. You can pull it locally. You have that image forever.
They have a private registry as well.
Yes. So sorry, it does default to a private registry. Yeah. And this is great because I'm shipping something to production that I actually have access to locally as well. So I don't have to actually go out to my production servers to see the image. I can pull it locally. Makes your life a lot easier. You'll notice that I've also included all of my environment variables here. You have to map them from this underscore version to the non-underscore version in this file. Okay. So let's go to the Cloud Build dashboard, and we can see what it looks like to actually get this thing up and running. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so the way you do this, Fireline, you start up your triggers. You build the trigger. I've got a trigger right here. Yeah, let's look at this trigger. Okay, so the trigger's got a name. You name it whatever you want, whatever description you want. And I'm going to key off on this trigger a push to a branch. So in this case, I'm going to push to master. So every push to master will run this trigger. And I'm going to say, I don't want to auto-detect. I'm just going to say, yes, I'm using a cloud build YAML file. You could probably auto-detect or use a Docker file, but I haven't played around with that. And next, you have your variables. You want to add all your variables. Don't want to expose too much there. This is all test data anyway. But so your underscore, your Firebase token will then map over in this over here, that Firebase token maps to a Firebase token. It gets injected into this container for every one of your build steps. Okay. Once I've got this build step running, you can see I've got a history of all these times it's built. And you can go through, you can watch the build, you can see every step of that Docker file that ran and make sure that it worked. And then at the end, you'll see that it pushes out to something to the container registry.
How big are those images getting, Chris? I mean, you have a couple of layers there. That means that they can get quite sizable, those Docker images.
It can, yeah. In fact, that's really important. We're going to go over in a little bit how you cache, how you set up caching in your steps. You're always running off of the latest. You're caching off the last version you built. So I don't.
That's
do that.
Brilliant. That's gold. Now that's some grade A information for anybody listening online here that is moving into this area when you're building Docker images, to use that caching layer and to be able to run off build images quicker and save on space.
Yeah, makes a big difference. So yeah, we'll hit that in the tips and tricks in a second. I just want to go through real quick. Let's make sure I made all my points here. Okay. Substitution variables injected in the Docker container. Each trigger has its own variable. So you can set up lots of triggers. For example, I'll have my prod GCP project with a trigger for master and a trigger for a prod branch. And then for master, that'll go to my dev staging environment. I'll have it with all those variables, so it deploys to that spot. And then for prod, I'll have it with, of course, the prod variables, so it deploys to my prod environment, my prod Firebase with my prod Firebase token, my prod Firebase project. I'll put that all in the prod project, so I only have to worry about one Docker build, or one of these guys. Yeah. You don't have to have it in separate projects. Just one project can do both. Yeah. But the nice thing is I can push to master, and it'll always go to my staging environment. And when I want to, I can push to origin, master prod, and it'll push it up to prod, and then it goes up to prod. Okay. One more thing I want to say real fast. If you're doing enterprise work, you probably want to have your secrets in Vault, not necessarily have them all in your environment variables right here. So you can actually inject stuff into Vault with your.
That's HashiCorp Vault you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So that's a little tricky. That's more advanced. I haven't actually done it myself. I've done it with some enterprise projects I'm working on. I would just recognize that that's like the next level of security for those big enterprise projects. But personally, I keep it all in Cloud Build. So.
Good tip. So we've got tip number 1. Always, if you care about the project, always have 2 versions. Tip number 2, get your DevOps on.
Get your DevOps on.
Tip number 3, we can use HashiCorp Vault if we need to go out into the big bad world and we need to keep things safe and more secure. Other than that, we can keep your variables in, where are we keeping them now? Cloud.
We're keeping them in Cloud Builds in your trigger.
All right.
So I'm just keeping them right here in my trigger.
Don't show too much. People will be taking screenshots.
Yeah, they're going to have my development Stripe keys.
Typing out a token by hand.
Good luck. Yeah, type out my development Stripe keys and you can make fake transactions in Stripe for me. Yeah. Okay. So here's an example down here for how I've cut build time on this project. I'm building out a project called flyer.co, and the builds are getting long, and so I implemented some really basic caching, and it cut it in half. All I had to do was this little bit right here. So I pull from the builder. I pull the last tagged image, and if it doesn't exist, I exit with 0, so it doesn't throw an error on the very first one. And then when I build, I tag it, but I use a cache from flag to cache from the prior instance.
So we got a question here from Diego. Did you get a chance to read that, Chris?
Yeah, I asked, does Firebase have plans to add environments for projects? I do not believe so. It doesn't fit with the pattern I've seen from them, and I would be really surprised if they went with that. what happens? You end up just having multiple GCP projects because that's the only way you can assure isolation for each environment. Although I have used different collections, named collections in my Firestore to host different versions. So I have like my stage collection and then have sub collections off of that, and my prod collection, my sub collections off of that. You can do that, but you have to share auth. So not always ideal. Yeah. Okay. So my last little bit of tip here, create scripts for local debug. This is critical because you're going to hate your life if you've got to run your whole CI/CD pipeline every time you want to debug something. So if you've got a project, if you've got one that fails, you want to be able to go back and run it locally, run that container locally, and shell into it and use it. So if I've got a problem with it, I can go into my package.json and do like npm run with a script name. I can do CI build to run it locally. So that'll Docker build with just a generic fireline, whatever tag locally. Then I can run CI interactive to Docker run itrm fireline and shell into it. So this command lets me shell into my local, lets me run my local version. CI, this pull lets me pull from the registry. So I can pull down the version that's been run in my, in the CI/CD pipeline. And in this line here, CI latest lets me then shell into a running version of that. And then I've got shell access to that version. I can see what's working, what's not working, test my next build step, and edit my Docker file appropriately until I get a Docker file that compiles correctly and does.
And that's pretty much good advice for anybody working with Docker containers right there. Being able to run these things and not have to go to your CI/CD pipeline every time. And you have this stuff up on the link that you shared with the group earlier on today.
Yes, so this is all linked out, and you can get to the Fireline project, which is a fully working example of everything I've talked about.
And you're giving this away. Just happy Christmas. Well done, guys. Thanks for coming to the stream tonight and watching the Firebase Extended.
It's open source, man.
You're a gentleman, sir. A gentleman.
Okay. The next trick is using Dockerizing your dev environment. So using Docker Compose. Now, usually I'd ask it for a raise of hand, like who's used Docker Compose. Not going to work. Hopefully, yes. Yes, I've got
yes.
Taker.
Can we get some hands in the chat? Let me see the chat, guys. Who's used Docker Compose? Give me some pluses in there. Hey, get in there, Sharon.
Docker Compose is so fantastic. It lets you run lots of Docker containers, all from really easy command line calls, and it networks them together automatically. So you don't have to worry about the ports. It handles the ports for you, networks them all together so they can talk to each other. So
all by name. You just give it the name, not a database. You just call it something and then call that name.
Yeah. If I have a container that I call Vault, I can just be like curl Vault.
That's it.
It's Vault. It's magical.
It's fantastic.
So, so this Fireline project, it has a workspace, which is an Ubuntu-based dev environment where I do all the actual work. It mounts on the app folder and sets up all the ports and connects to Nginx, and then you can just work within that. So I can work on my Windows box in full Ubuntu. Don't know the difference. I also run a Vault, local Vault that runs that's backed by GCP, so I can manage my secrets locally. I run an Nginx as well, so I can do reverse proxying back to myself and serve SSL certs. So I can say you can go to https.local or local.chrisesplin.com and see whatever I'm working on that day. It'll just be served up there. And then I have a certbot instance as well that runs my certs through Let's Encrypt. So I can get my certs automatically, serve them up automatically, and then manage my secrets with Vault. VS Code's remote containers extension is a hot ticket to a really, really clean dev environment. You can open with this, you can open VS Code within your workspace container. And so it knows about all the file changes and updates them, and you can edit directly within that container, and it doesn't have to leak out of that container. It really solves your file system problems. Fantastic extension.
That's a great tip for anybody listening. And me. I'm going to use that tomorrow in work myself. Thank you, sir.
Do it. It's so good. I've been using it last year or two, and it's really been nice since it came out. So just real quick, Docker Compose. Docker Compose up-D brings up all your containers. Docker Compose down takes them all down. Docker Compose run with service ports and RM to delete when you're done. Workspace SH, that runs a temporary instance. If you've Docker Composed up, you've brought them all up, you can then exec IT into your workspace or Vault or Nginx or Certbot or whatever. You can shell into it, so you can get into your running instance from outside. You can list your instances. Also, just alias Docker Compose to DC, because no one likes typing that. It's a real handful. Okay. And this is just an example of what my file looks like. It looks really crazy, but in fact, it's a lot of copy paste and not really that bad. So if you spend a little bit of time, you'll figure this out pretty quickly. Okay. So that's it. I've got right open for questions. Anyone? What do you guys want to hear? What did I miss?
What did you miss? I think you covered nearly everything. You went much wider than Firebase. You went into Docker. We saw projects. We saw some of your businesses that you've been working on, and all these are running with Firebase, right? Because you were there before Google bought it out.
Oh yeah.
Well before. Okay.
I've got the old school Firebase shirt on, if you can see
the old school
old
T-shirt.
logo they discontinued. Yeah.
That is OG, as they say.
Yeah, I need my OG shirt. Keep up my OG cred.
But let's get the bit of a link back, just to link back to what PJ was talking about earlier on. Can we see use any of the tools that we saw, like in Jenkins running his emulator using some of your tools? Docker emulator in Jenkins, I suppose is what I'm asking.
That would be interesting. I have not tried that. That'd be crazy.
We did get told that it wasn't a good idea to Dockerize the emulator.
It wasn't.
Really?
Were we listening to PJ?
I was doing my best while reading comments and typing.
Don't Dockerize emulator. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always used the emulator as sort of like a workflow thing while I'm in the process. I've never tried to use it in a CI/CD pipeline before. I've always used like a full GCP instance to work against.
Because there is a lot of there is quite a scope for calls. I mean, it's your first couple 100,000 that are free read writes. There's a lot in there that you're not getting charged. I mean, and as we Chaba asked the question. Was it Chaba that asked the question, or Diego? Like, you have to have a separate GCP project for different instances, so it's a different billing. So you're still getting those 40,000 read writes before you start getting billed. That's a lot of read writes, even if when you're hammering it for development and pushing it up through CI/CD.
Yeah, you're gonna have a hard time blasting through that free tier. Frankly, I put every single one of my projects on Blaze. I just upgrade them immediately, so I don't have to worry about it. Because Blaze, which is the pay-as-you-go, it still has the free tier in it, and I barely ever bust through the free tier.
I didn't know that. I should have known that, but maybe wearing the Google T-shirt. But I suppose you'd know more wearing the Firebase T-shirt.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 minutes now before we have to change over to our Fireside chat. If there's anybody listening online, since Chris is kindly answering questions right now, if there's anything you'd like to ask here before we move to the Fireside chat, you can stick it into the YouTube chat, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay. And you can always hit me also, my name at Chris Esplin on Twitter if you have questions for me as well.
Do I have that here? Let me just check here if I have your Twitter up on one of these slides. Maybe was it on this one? Go back one.
I don't have it on a slide.
No, okay. No. Sorry about that, guys. It might pop it into the chat? Maybe get a couple extra followers.
Yeah, and some chats, some DMs. All right.
There
Great,
we go. We got it. We got a question. Did that pop up? That didn't pop up. There we go.
Oh,
But it's
yeah.
easy to hit number of projects limit. Okay.
It does. They get angry with you when you have too many, and they don't like you creating too many. Yeah.
Okay. So we have to head over towards the stream one. This has been Chris Esplin, who has kindly donated his time and answered so many of our questions and questions we didn't even know we had. Thank you so much, sir. If you had one parting piece of advice for the group, what would it be?
From me, advice for the group?
From you, sir.
Always use
Just to
environment
put you on the
variables.
spot.
Always use environment variables.
Always use environment
Don't hard
variables.
code your stuff. It'll end up on GitHub.
No one wants that.
Oh.
Okay, guys, there should be a link right below us down here to jump over to stream one, where we'll have a fireside chat. PJ will be over there. And Chris, you okay to hang on for a few more minutes, answer some questions?
Yeah.
Fantastic, sir. Into stream one. We're going to stream one. The link is below. Thank you, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.